So basically, before you get going, so looking at planning for fishery management, looking at how we're going to make the maximum, make the most from your work parties. A little bit on health and safety law. It's not the most fun of activities and fun of interesting of topics for an evening, so we'll keep that very short and sweet. Then we're looking really into the nitty gritty of it. So the risk assessments, what to look for when you're on site, some of the PPE, and then we'll finish with a little bit more around sort of clothing and getting the most from your sort of fishery management plans. So before we kick off, you've got to ask yourself this question. Before you really start and just get your volunteers working on site, just have a think. Really, what do you want to achieve? What's your aim of the from the work party that you're undertaking, or the task you're doing on that day? What do the volunteers know? Do the volunteers know what you're doing? Have we got a plan of works? Have you got drawings, etc.? Are you clear about what you want them to be doing? And again, that really is restricted by how many volunteers do we have. We all know the best will in the world, people will volunteer to do something. Yeah, I'll be there on Sunday, and then the weather changes, or there's a good game of football on, or they get to the seaside with the family instead, and you don't quite have the numbers that you think you're going to get. So you are really restricted by the amount of manpower you can get. And again, we all know with volunteers, you've got to be quite brutal in your thinking. Really, how competent are people? How fit, keen, and sensible are they? Can you trust them to go off and on their own and do jobs? And will they work to the standard that you're expecting? Again, do they have any skills you can use? Lots of angling clubs and lots of fisheries have got a wide range of members in and some of them will have skills that you can put to good use. If you've got a member who turns up and he's got a brush cutter ticket, or he's got he can drive a digger, or he can use a chainsaw, and they're competent and they're fully certificated to do that, they're absolutely worth their weight in gold. And so there's value in asking them what they can do, and really trying to make the most of those skills. Again, planning ahead. Have you got the right kit? Have you got enough materials for the day? There's nothing worse than turning up on a job to do a job, and you turn up and you've got two spades and a hammer, and the hammer's only is bent. Make sure you've got enough kit and materials, and it's fit for the jobs you're going to be doing. Have you done a risk assessment? Have you relayed that risk assessment to those volunteers who are helping you? And we'll come back and touch on risk assessment in a bit more detail in a second. Again, how long have you got? Is this going to be, is it a one-off? Is it a job you want to get done in a day? Is it something you're going to come back to later on? If you're going to come back to it, can you secure that site so people don't interfere with it? If it's starting on one weekend and you're going to finish it another weekend, how can we can secure that site? Can we get things done? And the key to this is keep your volunteers happy. Tea and biscuits, really important. Make sure that everybody's happy. Give them a something hot at break, a cup of tea and a biscuit, or somebody fires a barbecue up and you have a sausage butty or a burger at lunch. It is important. Just keeping spirits high and making people value what they or know that they're valued for what they're doing. And then finally, who's in charge? Make sure you've got somebody who's leading that task. If that's what they do for a day job and they do it for a living, they're working, the ground workers or the contractors, they've got some experience. Make sure there's somebody who's actually driving and overseeing what's going on at the on the task on that day. And there's loads of ways of managing fisheries. This is a fishery management plan. It's to do with a commercial fishery in North Africa. There's a simple sort of schematic in the bottom right there. I'm looking at it. Planning, doing, reviewing, planning, doing, reviewing. Get to where do you think you want to get to? Where's your end goal? Where are you now? And what's those steps you're really going to go through to get to that final finished sort of fishery? How you want it to look. So again, this is a living document. So really, to come back to it and revise it and review it. Do it with your committee or with your team, or whatever it might be. But really, we've all seen this acronym, haven't we? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, and short. We don't want lots and lots of multiple steps. That's going to take us, many years to get to. Keep it simple for the work you've got planned and the work you're doing in that. And a lot of work parties across the winter. Is it one season's worth of work that you want to actually get done? Right. A little bit of legislation. just really to flag this to you. Some of you who are here will have a lot more experience of working in these sorts of areas, so health and safety at work legislation. I won't bore you with it too much, but really, criminal law aimed at protecting employees and others who might be affected by work activities. And this is enforced by both the health and safety executive and local authorities. But the real key here is generally, HSE and local authorities have no power to investigate incidents in relation to most purely voluntary activities. So if you're working on a purely voluntary basis and there's an accident, it doesn't fall on the health and safety executive. What we do need to bear in mind is that the Health and Safety at Work Act does come into force if the organisation is, if it is a voluntary organisation and you've got an employee, then that health and safety legislation changes and it is enforceable. Even if you're working with 20 volunteers and there's a full-time member of your staff watching over them, then if the health and safety legislation does change. And also important to note on this, it doesn't include it doesn't include damage. So if a volunteer drops a tree on a car, you could well be liable for that damage. So the health and safety legislation, you've got to just be aware of this, and I'm sure you've all come across it within your day jobs. What we need to really define here is what is a volunteer. And as with a lot of things, there is no legal definition. We do have to, we can dig around and we can look at sort of some guidance. So that there's the NCVO, the National Centre for Voluntary Organisations, use this same description, and this is the one from the Home Office from their publication in 2001. An activity that involves spending time unpaid doing something that aims to benefit the environment or someone, be that an individual or a group, other than or in addition to close relatives. And the key really for us here is it's undertaken freely and by choice without concern for financial gain. So this is the important bit for a lot of work parties and a lot of what angling clubs do. It's undertaken freely by choice and without concern for financial gain. And if we just look at that, really, so volunteers' work has to be unpaid and without expectation of payment. Doesn't mean you can't reimburse people for out-of-pocket expenses. It must be out-of-pocket expenses only. You can't pay people for their time. So again, without free will and no coercion, and it's got a wider benefit, and you're doing it at the direction of behalf of the organisation. So you're volunteering on behalf of the angling club or behalf of whoever it might be, and it's not legally binding. So there's no contract or anything entered into there. What we've got with angling clubs and associations is there's a little bit of a grey area around work parties and work parties that are used as part of a payment scheme. So if you come to a work party, you'll get 20 quid off your season ticket, or you'll get if you've got a night ticket to fish these waters, you're expected. If you have a night ticket, you're expected to do X number of hours of work parties, or you do 2 work parties, or you're fined, or you pay, or you can pay to get out of things. That then is deemed to be either, it could be seen as either coercion or as a payment. So this sort of idea of these sort of referred to as privilege pay, so reduced memberships, honoraria, and things like that, could be seen by the government as being entered into a contract, and it's a really sticky sort of area to be in. It could be seen by the authorities that you've entered into a employee-employer relationship if there are payments made. So we do need to bear that in mind. And I will just draw your attention to an excellent guide produced by the Angling Trust, which on the back of a lot of what we've been doing with regards to volunteers, both in this with regards to fishery mines, but also through the voluntary bailiff scheme and other things. So do please have a look at that, and it does give some really useful information, and it's a hyperlink at the bottom. People should just want to do it. They shouldn't be forced or coerced into doing it for benefits. They should just be wanting to turn up and volunteer and lend a hand to improve the fishery, whatever it might be. So moving away from that sort of common law into the sort of more the civil law, we do have to have a duty of care. So that duty of care is to each other and anybody else who might be affected by the activities of that work party. So it might be, you're working on a fishery and there's a public footpath comes past it, or you've got dog walkers, or there's people on horseback uses the same site, or it's open to the public. So we do have to have think wider than just those of us who are doing that task on that day. So this duty of care. So if something does go wrong, there is a chance that individuals could sue you for damages using civil law. But again, for a negligence claim to really to succeed, that injured person must show that the defendant had a duty to take reasonable care towards them, and that the injury was suffered because of that lack of care. So if we can show we've got a duty of care, we've got adequate signage up, we're using machinery on site, we've fenced it off, we've put signs on entrances, we've closed any or we've put alternate routes in for people to get around the fish, wherever the work it might be taken. We're showing adequate duty. We're limiting the opportunities for the general public of people not involved in activities to come into harm. So again, it comes back right to what I said at the beginning: thinking and planning and looking bigger picture stuff as to what might happen on the day, and being aware of all of the potential incidents. So think about everything that might be happening and who might come into contact with that work on the day. And again, just the final piece here really is around health and safety at work regs in 1999, and this is where we can start to look. It's an extension of the 74 Act, and it's starting to look towards sort of general duties and trying to protect and look at protect people and employed both in the Act and those public, and sort of very loose term in there, and it's around the term of so far as reasonably practicable. So you've taken every possible step to minimize risks, minimize the potential for harm and for damage by other people, as far as is reasonably practicable, to allow you to minimize risk but still undertake that job. And it could be it could be technically impossible to reduce the risk. It could also be too timely, or for small organizations like a lot of angling clubs, cost is included in that reasonably practicable. So you could show that the cost of you minimizing that risk far outweighed the amount of funds you had available, or the benefit of removing that risk. So it is you can include both time and cost in there. And the key element of the work health and safety at work regs is the requirement on employers to carry out a risk assessment. Again, we're talking about employers, employees. Remember what I said about a volunteer organization? There is no employer-employee relationship there. It's not contractual, but for you to show duty of care, remember what we just talked about, carrying out a risk assessment and making people aware of those risks is showing duty of care. So I would highly recommend, if you do complete risk assessments, which we're going to touch on next. So be really maintaining that duty of care. We carry out risk assessment, we relay those risks and how we've reduced the hazards to those employed at the on the work party, and we know then we've covered ourselves under that duty of care, and we've minimized the potential for people who are working with us to come into harm. We do live in a slightly risk-averse environment these days. And again, I'm sure you've all come into contact with risk assessments, both at work or in any activities that you might take, any sort of, you turn up at sporting events, or you turn up at any sort of voluntary events. We do have this ability, or this need to carry out a risk assessment. But it is, if you look back some of the old days, you look at steeplejacks climbing, Fred Dibner climbing chimneys without a harness on, just on a ladder with a flat cap and his pipe in his mouth. Not really sure we want to be going back to those sorts of days, but in the same vein, we don't want to go to a level like we can see on the right hand side, where everything has got a risk assigned to it, and it limits and restricts us from doing our tasks effectively. Again, I won't go through this in too much detail, but the Health and Safety Executive have identified these 5 steps to completing a risk assessment. You've identified the hazard. Yeah, we've decided who might be harmed and how. So again, that's looking bigger, broader than just the work party. It's the general public. It's anybody who might come into contact with the site or with those activities on the day. And the risk really is a guide to help you evaluate those risks. So what's the risk? What's the likelihood of that happening? How can we minimize it? Yeah, so we look at the risk. We normally give it a score on a risk register of 1 to 5, or we red, amber, green, or whatever it might be. And then based on that, we look at, with the precautions, how can we minimize and reduce that risk of happening and impacting people. And then we record them. Yeah, and that's the the bit of paper, or it's the document, or whatever it might be. That's your risk assessment. That's on. We record those and we implement them. And then the bit that often gets forgotten about, particularly within volunteer groups and angling clubs, is to review them. We look at them and we review them on an annual basis, or every time the times we're going out to do that task. And it might be that you have to update them. You might have changed how you operate. You might have changed the entrance to the fishery, or the way you get in, or you've removed the steps, or whatever it might be, and that tweak and amends the risks shown on your risk assessment. And it doesn't have to be, you'd have to do a new one for everything. You might be able to have a standardized template, and you amend it and adapt it for different tasks or different waters that you've got on there. We do have whenever we do look at tasks, we do actually have 3 different types of risk assessments. There's a general risk assessment, yeah, so that might be for the activity, a volunteer activity. On there would be general sort of things: slip, strips and falls, weather, inclement weather, working on wet banks, and all that sort of stuff goes in there. Then if you've got multiple fisheries or multiple waters that you're working on, then you'll want a site-specific risk assessment for each work party on those sites, because every site is different. And then the final one, which isn't on here, which is just what we call a dynamic risk assessment. So this is something where you get to the site on a day, you spend 5 minutes looking around, and you just see if anything's changed, and you relay that to those people on the day, rather than oh, that's interesting, I must note that down, but you don't actually tell people. So yeah, once you've got them and you've got a template for them, and you share them with your committee and people who are involved in these jobs, it's easy to do. One thing I must say is, risk assessments aren't yours. If you write them, they aren't your property. They are to be shared with everybody who's doing that task. And I've been on some work parties with some organisation where they actually physically hand round a paper copy, and everybody signs to say they've seen it. Or you get email or contact data and you share it, or you put it in the clubhouse at the start of the morning and you ask people to read it, make sure they're aware of it, or you pull out those key points and you articulate that to people and say, today the high risk areas are here and here, and we want to be conscious of that. So again, really about relaying that message to people who are there on the day. And this is just a standard diagram. This is what we call a hierarchy of controls. It starts at the top. The biggest bang for your buck really is you eliminate it. If you could physically remove the hazard, that's the top line on any sort of risk assessment. You take it away, it can't hurt people. But we can go for various stages, and if we can't remove it, we can't restrict it, then we can look at protecting ourselves against it. And that's when we can look at things like PPE. We can use hard hats, we can use steel toe cap boots, we can use high vis, we can use protective trousers for chainsaws, we can use eye protection. There's a whole raft of things we can use to minimize the risk. And those elements, those PPE elements, again, will appear on risk assessments, and make sure, or task specific risk assessments. If you're sending people out, a gang out to build swims, what do they need within the PPE to allow them to make and build those swims safely and effectively? Same might apply if you've got people doing bramble control or nettle strimming or whatever it might be. There's you might want to just have a conscious effort to have a specific sort of risk-based form and PPE for that. There's loads of examples of risk assessment forms. This is one we use at the Institute for our electric fishing operations. As you can imagine, this is just one page of about 6. We're putting people in water, and we're going to give them electrical equipment and turn it on. It's not your everyday activity. And what I've been doing over the years is that when we work with other organisations, I build my risk assessment based on their own and with our things, and I add to it. So it's a very dynamic document, this. So yeah, so it's now up to about 5 pages, I think, of various elements we need to consider. Again, this isn't exhaustive at all. There's lots of things you might add to risk assessment, just a bullet list really here. Things to be considered. And again, you'll be aware of these on your own site. So things like cattle, be that farm animals or horses, inquisitive. Overhead cables, you'll be aware of those on your site and what your safe working distance is from there. Thinking about waste, particularly in urban sites, is there any risk of sharps? We're talking about needles and syringes, broken bottles, like rusty cans, anything like that on site we need to be considerate of. And then you've got to think about people going in. Immersion. Hypothermia happens 26 times quicker in water. Once you go in, we all know about that shock that we get that temperature shock. We take a big deep gulp of air or water, and then we're in trouble. So really be aware of that. And then really, when you're looking at things like the emergency services, where's the access point? You can give a national grid reference. Some people will put what through words on there as well. But if you're doing that, just be really conscious of you're nice and clear. If you can give a national grid reference and a postcode, the emergency services much prefer that from what through words, because you only have to get the words wrong or have a strong accent, and the operator can't understand you, and it doesn't work. Yeah, so as much detail as you can, and I'll show you in a second the sort of detail we can go into when we're looking at these. And again, just be conscious of things like mobile reception and access for emergency vehicles. Can they get on site, and can you actually ring for emergency services if you need to? We even, if mobile phone technology has come on leaps and bounds, there are still mobile black spots in this country, so we do need to be aware of that, and make sure you've got different. Although mobile phones do roam, if you've got volunteers who have got different phone contracts on different providers, then you've got options there as well, haven't you? So I've just gratuitously ripped this off the Environment Agency. We do some work for the EA through the Institute, and this is one of their site sheets that they provided to us when we were delivering some training to them. This is for a site on a river. This is just at Brampton, in Cambridge, sorry. And it really just goes into sort of minute detail as to where we are, how we get access, where the access roads are, where the emergency services can get to them. You've got the key elements from the risk register is on the left-hand side, and that's at the top sheet. We've got site access on there and who the contact details are, both for the angling club, for the work we're doing, the telephone number, contact details. And then on the right-hand side, you've got a large-scale map and the dot of where we're going to be, so you can show where it is in relation to the nearest town. Then you've got the junction and the access point there, and then you've actually got a site picture as well. So we know when we turn up, this is for a fish survey, we could see what the site looks like well in advance, and we can plan and start to make some plans accordingly. So again, I'm not saying you go into this much detail, but it's a really nice thing from the Environment Agencies. It's quite useful to have a look at and sort of mirror or look again, steal elements from it. Just get the best bits and put them to use for yourselves. Right, so moving on then, really, so managing safety. This is one of my sort of pet hates when you see on work parties. You could buy a chainsaw from the middle aisle of Aldi. It doesn't make you a lumberjack. Yeah, so if anyone turns up with specialist kit, should be a chainsaw or a strimmer or anything like that, make sure you ask for their certificate of competence. They should be trained. Yeah, under the pure, you see operators using chainsaws for any task in agriculture, which includes fisheries work, or any other industry, must be competent. And this is under the pure regs. And the pure regs is the provision and use of work equipment regs in 1998. So there's an expectation that people who are using this equipment in an agricultural and outdoor setting has had some degree of training. Within that, an expectation that they've been certificated. So there's two certificating awarding bodies, MPTC and City and Guilds, and there's levels you can go to. And again, brilliant people want to come and turn up and use their equipment and think they're being useful, but from a delivery and a health and safety and a duty of care point of view, be really careful if people are turning up with their kit. Make sure they're competent, make sure you've asked to see the certificates, make sure their kit, their saws, their strimmers, whatever their machinery they're using is safe and has been serviced accordingly, and they're happy and confident in what they're in using it. Get them to show you that they're competent. Just a couple of pictures I've taken, just robbed them off social media. I'm in loads of groups and things for fisheries work. This is the sort of thing we often see, or we see. We've got people working with chainsaws over water, using a saw. Yes, they've got a pair of gloves on, but they've got no other PPE. That's not a safe and stable environment for that sort of job. And I would expect to see, a greater level of sort of PPE and care being taken. And likewise here, you've got somebody in a pair of jeans using a saw in an unstable environment, no gloves, no hat. And I do like these comments. These were from somebody who registered to attend the event the last time I did it back in 2022. They'd registered to attend. Yeah, don't think hanging by a branch with a chainsaw will be on the agenda. And that's the sort of thing, all right, tongue in cheek and all the rest of it. But, it's that sort of thing that, it only takes that chainsaw to bounce and somebody's going to be in real trouble. And I think they had, it's somewhere in the region of 4 to 6 injuries and fatalities by chainsaws each year. Yeah. So again, these are not toys. Yeah. Just because you buy them in Aldi doesn't make them, toys. They are heavy, dangerous bits of kit, and we do need to be aware of that. And if you are using them, there is a brilliant health and safety executive guide to using chainsaws. I suggest you pull it off, put it in your clubhouse and materials, and make sure of that they're followed before you allow people to operate. And again, there's lots of guidance on this, and if you are going to be felling trees, there's exclusion zones, there's exit routes, there's conditions you need to be aware of. You must have a suitable risk assessment for it. You must ensure that everybody is aware of it. You must ensure that these areas are securely fenced off and demarked, so people don't come wandering in when the chainsaws are being operated. If you're working at height, you need to make sure that people have got the correct certification for that. There's lots of sort of things to be aware of. And again, please do some more investigations into it. Yeah. A lot of your members are going to be classed as hobbyists. They're not going to be a fully certificated chainsaw user. I've got a chainsaw ticket. I've not used a chainsaw in anger for a couple of years now. Before I was to go out again, I would need to be going on a refresher course. And this is recommended. People who use them on a regular basis, I think the refresher training is every 5 years. For those who are occasional users, they recommend you go on a refresher every 2 years. So again, something for you to maintain and to check on with your with your volunteers when they come to use your use equipment like this. And also, before you enter into these sorts of things and you have this idea you're going to start felling trees, make sure they haven't got any protection orders on them, referred to as a TPO, tree protection order. If you start dropping trees that are protected, then you're going to be in trouble with the local environment officer within the council. And if you're working on any designated sites, SSSIs, SPAs, SACs, whatever it might be, you'd need permission from Natural England before you even undertake that work. So make sure you're covered both on for the safety and also with regards to the regulations and the restrictions of what you might be able to do on that site. Now, just to look a little bit more detail, that isn't me on the left-hand side at Bridlington. It's just to show, we do get people turning up in the most inappropriate equipment. The chaps on the right-hand side, very much more equipped, better equipped for the jobs that they might be undertaking. We do need to be conscious as well about the weather and how quickly the weather can change in this country, particularly this autumn and winter we've had so far. They're getting these heavy cloud bursts, these really heavy downpours, and it can change from being nice and mild to soaking wet and thunderstorms and snow very, very quickly. So again, just make sure people are aware and they've got the right equipment, and don't let people go wandering off in tracky bottoms and white trainers for a day's work. And also, while this picture's up, I think it's important to point out that the equipment you provide to volunteers must be safe. Again, I bring you back to that duty of care. If a volunteer asks to use their own equipment, then fine, let them use their own equipment. Yeah, but again, making sure they're competent to use it and it's safe. If they're using their own equipment and they're happy to do so and they have an accident, then that's them. The duty of care has been passed back on to them. But again, don't be, if you're giving out equipment and it's faulty, yeah, you do need to be aware of that. You could be, again, under common law and that duty of care, you could be liable. So make sure all equipment you use is maintained. You've got a maintenance log for it as well. And if people bring their own kit, let them use it, again, but maintaining that safe working practice. Right, just a little bit about lone working. We all do it. I've done it. I'm sure a lot of you have as well. You get, oh, I'll go and sort out X swim, or I'll go and sort out, the pallet swim. And the pallet swim is 120 yards down the bank. You can't see pallet swim because of the trees and the whatever is in the way. And somebody's working on the run. It does need to be very carefully managed. And just to say, a lone worker is defined by the Health and Safety Executive as those who work by themselves without close or direct supervision. So can you manage that as a group within your work party? Can you manage somebody being 100 yards up the bank on their own, fixing a swim that might hang over the water, or they might be clearing brash and it's over the water? So limit that. If it's going to be risky, don't let them do it on their own. Input a buddy system, so somebody's always working together. Again, make sure everybody's got a quite adequate PPE. If they must work on their own, make sure they've got line of sight to whoever's overseeing the activity. And you'll need a bespoke lone working out risk assessment. And if you're not happy, just don't do it. Yeah, just at the start of the day, just say, no, sorry, folks, we're not working our own. Please work as a minimum of two, and always try and maintain line of sight to your colleagues whilst you're doing it. And I like this page. We see this far too often, don't we, on work parties and other things. Even when you're in a team, you can still be lone working. You're the one grafting, and everybody else is stood around having a cup of tea and a biscuit, or smoking a fag, or whatever there might be. And even though there's 8 of you on a job, there's often only one person doing the work. Yeah, and we see this sort of far too often. So yeah, try not to be the person with a spade in this situation. And then really just a little bit more on PPE. There's lots. We wear dry suits. We wear a dry suit, and the guidance for us now when we're wearing dry suits is we still wear a life jacket. So we'd wear a dry suit and a life jacket. You can see a couple of guys there working on a boat clearing weed. They've got a nice stable pontoon to work from, but they're still wearing life jackets. They've got their PPE on. There's guidance around life jackets. There's different styles. So please, if you're going to give people life jackets, make sure you've got the adequate one. Be really conscious of giving out things like buoyancy aids and life jackets. It gives people a full sense of security. If you're going to do that, the mentally they think, oh, I've got a life jacket, and I can maybe go a little bit deeper. I can attempt this. Don't. Don't give buoyancy aids and life jackets unless it's absolutely necessary. Restrict people to working from the bank as much as you can. And if people are working in and around the water, have a throw line, have a life buoy to hand so you can give it to people. Yeah, and there's a picture on there as well of a harness. Yeah, really, it's a last resort. If you're going to harness people to bankside trees to protect them and give them a level of security, I'd be questioning whether or not I really want to do that job. So just be aware of that. And first aid, carry a first aid kit. Carry a first aid kit that's adequate for the number of people you've got on your task as well. And if you're not sure about first aid, there is a British standard for them, and there is a limit, and there is some guidance on first aid kit size for the number of people you've got engaged on a job. So again, follow it up, look at it. You might have a little personal one that fits on your belt, or you might have one in the back of your car, but you should have one on site, and be conscious of applying first aid to people. And then, finally, bring it all together. This really comes right back to the beginning. What's the plan? Is everybody being aware of the risk assessment? Have we talked it through? Do we know who's using what and where? Is all the kit safe? And I've got the equipment, people wearing adequate PPE. They know what they're doing. We know how long we've got. We know when we're having the important things, the tea, biscuits, and the bacon butties. And we've restricted that site to the general public. It's secure. We aren't going to have dog walkers coming on site. We're not going to have people wandering in and seeing what's going on, so that everything is safe and is good to go. And we're ready to have that, have a productive day and a productive work party, and we'll get a lot done. And that's me. Occasionally go fishing, very rarely, and occasionally catch something. Again, very rarely. If you want any more information, please do drop me a line. It's my email address on there. I say we're at the Institute of Fisheries Management. We've got a website, we've got social, Facebook, and all the rest of it. So yeah, thanks for listening.